Hey everyone and welcome to the channel. Today we're working on another cool kitchen knife storage solution, the magnetic knife block. I've made a wall mounted magnetic knife block before, but sometimes drilling holes into walls just isn't where you want to be. So I thought it would be nice to make a version that can live on the bench and be moved around easily. So for this one we're using a mixture of Tasmanian blackwood and celery pine. I'll start off by cutting the boards down to length. As far as the size of this one, I'm letting the magnets I've purchased be my guide. The magnets I have for this project are 60mm or about 2.5 inches, so I'm wanting to use 6 per row, giving me a width of 360mm or about 14.25 inches. You could easily make this panel any size you like. Just measure a few of your knife's blade height and multiply by the number that you would like to store. With the boards cut to length, I'll run these over the joiner on two sides, and then pop them through the thicknesser. The pieces are about 22mm or 7/8 of an inch, but quite rough, so I'll just bring them down until they're nice and smooth. With our milling all done, I'll jump over to the table saw and get the panels ripped down to width. This is what's going to set the height of our panel. I'm going to rip these down to about 125mm or 5 inch. I know I'm going to lose a little through trimming down over the course of this project, so I want to leave myself some room. With the pieces cut to the right width, I'll resaw one of the pieces to make two thin panels and pop them through the planer to take them down to about 8mm or 5/16. Now that we have our first pieces cut, let's get them glued together into panels. I'll start with the thinner panel. Now I've never glued up a panel this thin before, and in hindsight, probably should have just used a thicker piece and planed it down. But I kind of bought the right amount of wood I needed for the project, so here goes. I'm guessing there's a smarter way to do this, but instead of stopping and trying to find out a simpler method, I just soldiered on until it sat flat enough for the job. With the thin one done, I'll glue up the thicker panel and get these into clamps to set overnight. It's the next day and the glue is all set up, so I'll pop off the clamps and run the pieces through the thicknesser just to clean them up. And it's time to make a home for our magnets. On the thicker piece, we'll start off by cutting a small dado. Using the magnets that will live in the board as a bit of a height gauge, I'll set the height of my blade a smidge higher than the magnet and take a pass. I haven't changed the blade in my saw for this as it's only a few grooves, and if they're a pinched oversized, it won't make much of a difference. But if you have a dado blade set to the right width, it would do a much cleaner job. But because this blade is a fair bit thinner than the magnet, I'll just keep bumping the fence over slightly and continue taking passes until the channel is wide enough to accept our magnets. And that looks close enough for what we're trying to achieve, so I'll repeat the process for 2 more channels. I haven't really measured the spacing, but I do want them to end up closer to the top, as in my mind there will be more weight toward the top, so I think that's where the magnetic focus should be. Now it's time to put our magnets into place. On the last magnetic knife rack video I made, I got a handy tip from Tail End Customs in the comments about putting a piece of steel under the project when setting magnets, and it really helps. So let's slide the magnets into place. I don't know how, but I always manage to make this stuff look really hard. If you get the magnets the wrong way around, they push away from each other. And even though I know this, and I try to check them before inserting them, they still try to fight me along the path. But we struggled through and got them all into place, with the super glue lightly holding them in their permanent home. Another little note here, try to leave a tiny amount of space at the end of each row, as we need to square this one up later on. We don't really want to be hitting these magnets with wood cutting saws. With the magnets set, I can glue on the face panel. We will just spread out a good amount of Titebond 2 over all the wood areas. I hit the magnets a little, but I'm sure it'll be okay, and get our thin face panel placed over the top. Light a couple of clamping coils and try to apply nice even pressure and leave this one to set up and dry. To hide all the ugly edges that we have from the center panel, I'm going to rip down a few more lengths of blackwood and add a few short lengths of celery pine as an accent. All I need to do here is add a little bit of glue to every other face and get these ones all clamped up and leave them to set. To get these ones ripped down to the right size, I'll use the board to sit the width on the table saw fence, and then bump it over just a little to make these strips slightly wider than the panel we're planning to stick them to. The reason is that I'm definitely no fine woodworker, and a little extra width here will give me some room to be able to sand down to. I would really hate to get these slightly off and have dips out near the edges of our rack. With them trimmed to width, I'll cut a 45 on the end of 2 strips, giving me a starting corner, and then mark out where I need to cut the next cut. Now I can simply mark out the second corner and cut the 2 side pieces down, leaving a little extra length so we have room to trim them. I'll sploob on a little glue and leave this one to set. After that's all dried, I'll trim the excess off the bottom of the panel. I'll use the center of the panel to set the fence on the table saw, then I'll take it away, turn the saw on and run the whole piece through. That should give us a nice clean edge along the bottom of the panel and a good starting point to be able to get set up for getting it ready to be mounted to our baseboard. Now for the baseboard. We're going to cut this down to a 500mm or 20-inch long piece. Next up, we want to give this panel a bit of a lean. I don't know the exact angle I'm looking for, but the nice thing about this project is because we have the magnets inside the top panel, I can stick on my magnetic angle finder and adjust it by eye until I get a look we're happy with. And it looks like about 8 degrees is the sweet spot we're looking for. So I'll match up the same angle with the blade on the table saw and run it through. Before we glue this one up, I'll run around all the edges with a 3mm or 3/16 round over bit, just to soften all those blocky edges. I'll start by scooting around the borders on the top panel and then hitting all the edges on the base. Now to bring the 2 halves together. I'm going to use the domino machine to join the 2 halves. You could definitely use dowels or even screws through the base if you'd prefer, but I paid a lot for this machine and I need to use it any chance I can get. So I'll start by marking a line across the base as a guide, and then I'll place the body of the block on top and set my spacing in from the sides. Then I'll mark the base and top section for the dominoes. With everything laid out, I'll start by cutting my mortises into the base. Then I'll set the fence on the domino to 82 degrees to match the 8-degree angle we cut earlier, and cut in our little pockets. With our pockets cut, we can test our little pegs and see if they fit. And hey, it actually worked. I've never really cut dominoes on an angle like this before, but it fits together really well. Before we do our last glue up, I'll give the whole thing a really good sand up to 180 grit, doing my best not to roll over any of the corners that we're about to glue up. And the last glue up, I just want to run a small line of glue across one edge, making sure I get some down into the mortises on both sides of the block. And now we can bring the two halves together and get them into clamps. It's the next day, and apparently I have a little spring in my step this morning. Or I tripped. I'm not really sure. So let's start off our day with a little hand sanding to clean up all the small spots where we've had some squeeze out, and we can apply our finish. I'm using hard wax oil on this one. It's a silk finish, so it should give us a durable, natural looking finish that will hold up well over time. Simply pour a little on, massage it into the wood grain and leave it to sit for about 5 minutes, and then buff off to a nice luster. I let this one sit a little too long, so it had gone a little too tacky, but with a little extra elbow grease we can get a nice sheen. I'm really happy with how this one turned out. I'm sure I'm not the first to come up with this idea, but it's something I haven't seen before, and it's a really approachable project for most people. If you like the purple handle knife in the video, check out the link above to see how it could be yours. Thanks for watching everyone. If you enjoyed it, please consider giving the video a like and subscribing to the channel. See you on the next one.